What's up, people, and welcome back to History Camp. My name is Mark Gagnon, and thank you for joining me in my tent where every single week we explore the most interesting, fascinating, controversial stories from all history, from all time, forever. Yes, this is my attempt to understand everything that's ever happened on this big, beautiful planet, and it wouldn't be possible without you. Yes, you, the people at home listening right now while you're at work, hanging out, washing dishes, whatever you're doing. I appreciate you for tuning in and keeping the fire burning. Speaking of which, we just launched X Communities, which sounds like what they did to King Henry VIII. But no, this is the place where I'm going to be tapping in with all the lovely campers out there in the world that want to chit-chat with me and other like-minded folks, doctors, engineers, lawyers, surgeons. What? I'm telling you, these are the people that listen to the show. They're some of the most they're the biggest intellectuals of our day and age. If Voltaire and Descartes were alive, they would be tuning into camp. But you can check it out. We got it in the description and in the comments or somewhere, wherever Christos put it. Speaking of which, Christos, how are you, pal? All right, Christos, we don't have time, all right, because we're talking about King Henry VIII. I'm also joined by my friend David, who does ads for the pod. He's also just a pal. He's what?
You just diminish the importance of being here.
It's hard to build you up when I just talked about how sick Christos is and how awesome and all the awesome escapades he's going on.
Confidant, friend, bestie.
Consigliere. Anyway, where do we begin with King Henry VIII? You probably know about his infamous marriages, his lineage of women, and his inability to have a boy. You know about probably just the general stuff, right? You knew he was fat, but we're going to get into all the details. Everything you didn't know, and truly what made this guy so obsessed with his succession, why he broke the entire country of England from the Vatican, why he created his own church, and everything in between. So where does this story begin? We're going to go all the way back to June 1491 at a small little home called Greenwich Palace. This is where a sweet baby boy is born, Henry Tudor, to King Henry VII. He is the second son, aka the backup plan, as they say, the spare, not the heir. Most people assumed that he'd end up in the church someday, not running a full-blown kingdom. Now, his father was a man who was, he basically ended the War of the Roses by sheer determination and strategy, and he married a woman named Elizabeth of York, uniting the houses of Lancaster and York. That is a big deal. This is where you get the famous Tudor rose, that red, white, petaled, woven together thing. This is a symbol of unity, or at least a symbol of what Henry VII wanted the world to believe. It looked really neat and pretty on banners and stuff, even if the actual politics underneath it was anything but that. Now, over time, largely through, Tudor propaganda, that symbol became embedded as English heritage, and monarchy found in emblems and on money and, military badges and sports, everything you can imagine that's associated with the heritage of England. Now, growing up, Henry lived in the shadow of his older brother, Arthur, the golden heir that everyone expected to eventually one day succeed his father and become, the next king. Now, Arthur was trained to be the king. Henry was educated with the expectation that, he's going to be involved in the church. And typically, that's how these things go, right? You have the ruling class, the, dominant monarchy, the political force, and then you have the religious class. And if you are a prudent ruler, you're going to have multiple sons, and you put them into different avenues. That way you can keep all the power with the family. So King Henry, or Henry at the time, was studying theology and got swept up in these, new humanist ideas spreading across Europe, ideas that focus on classical learning and critical thinking and what it means to be human. And he ended up becoming something sort of rare for loyalty, which is like a genuine Renaissance kid. He wasn't just smart, he was physically gifted too. He could knock like knights out of their saddles, and he was like making music that people liked, and he debated scripture with top scholars from around Europe. So through England's, more enlightened circles, he was learning from, acclaimed lawyer and, church scholar Thomas More, and then Erasmus. Yes, literally that. Erasmus likely visited him at Eltham Palace in 1499, and he was he walked away from his conversation with Henry, who was then just 8 years old, and he was so impressed by how sharp he was. And then one day, everything shifts for old Prince Henry. April 1502, his brother Arthur dies. Some say that he died from consumption, which is kind of like a medieval term for tuberculosis. Others say that he developed a sweating sickness. Basically, it was this terrifying disease that would come on in a few hours, and within a few days, you'd be dead. We still don't know the exact cause, but modern analysis of Arthur's remains still can't even solve it. But one thing is clear, that Henry's life changes immediately. The Spare, all of a sudden, is on track to lead the monarchy. Now, this whole church dream that his family had is now gone, and the crown is just waiting for him. So, when Henry VII dies in 1509, 17-year-old Prince Henry steps into the throne, looking nothing like the bloated, infamous fat guy that everyone thinks about. He was tall and charismatic and athletic, and he was just in every way the Renaissance ideal. He spoke multiple languages and, was a musician. He was a jousting champion, and he understood theology so well that it was impressing actual members of clergy. And within weeks, he married Catherine of Aragon, Arthur's widow. Awkward. The marriage needed a special papal dispensation because church law prohibited marrying a brother's widow, but the Pope granted it, though the biblical grounds were, still debated, right? The book of Leviticus was, forbidding this, while Deuteronomy appeared to allow it if the brother died childless, yada, yada, yada. All you need to know is that the Pope was cool with it, and there they were, King Henry and Catherine. And England loved him. After years under, his father, Henry VII's cautious rule, people suddenly had a king that was spending lavishly, and he wore beautiful clothes, and he danced, and he made music, and he fought. I mean, he was just the pinnacle of what it meant to be a king. By 1521, he even wrote a book defending Catholicism against Martin Luther. Yeah, that, not King. The OG Martin Luther, the one, the guy that 95 Theses, the reformed the church, yada, yada, yada. All you need to know is that the Pope loved it. And he loved it so much that he literally gave Henry the title Fide Defensor. This is the defender of the faith, one of the highest honors you can get from the Pope, which, considering what we're going to find out about Henry VIII, it's kind of ironic. But even in these early glamorous years, there were these tiny cracks that were starting to form in his rule. Yes, he was charming, but he also hated to be challenged. He believed deeply, so absolutely, in his own rightness. And of course, he was a smart guy, and people even admired him as a kid. So by the time he's an adult, he's like, yeah, who's going to challenge me? And thanks to, this Renaissance education that he got, he absorbed this dangerous idea that kings answer only to God, not to any earthly institution. Because he had so much, biblical and theological background, he was able to justify it. And so those seeds of tyranny were already planted from a young age, hidden under all that promise. And as the years rolled on, the distance between this ideal, enlightened Renaissance prince and this, absolute monarch that wants to separate his country from the church kept shrinking.